I was 29 when I finally decided to get married. Not because I hadn't been in love before or lacked chances, but because my parents, especially my mother, insisted that I wait my turn. She used those exact words, "Wait your turn," as if life was some lineup and I had pulled the wrong number. My younger brother Nathan had always been the golden child. Spoiled, indecisive, and completely unaware of how much our parents bent over backwards to give him the world. According to them, my job was to support him. "Let Nathan get settled first. You'll have your time," they said every time I brought up my plans to move in with Daniel, the man I had been seeing for 3 years. Nathan and I were close once. As children, we built pillow forts and whispered secrets in the dark. But somewhere along the way, things changed. It started small. He got the newer bike, the louder applause, the warmer praise. I was told to understand. "He's sensitive," my mother said. "He needs more help," my father added. So I learned to step back. When he failed a math class, I tutored him. When he crashed the car, I took the blame. It became a pattern. His chaos, my cleanup. And then there was the issue of marriage. A woman marrying before her younger brother? What would people think? My mother asked once at the dinner table, as if the neighbors would stage a protest. "It would humiliate Nathan," my father added, swirling his wine like he was discussing politics, not my future. "It might make him feel like a failure." At first I laughed. Surely they couldn't be serious, but they were, fully. In their eyes, my moving forward with my life would be a threat to Nathan's fragile sense of self-worth. They said it wasn't personal, just timing. But how do you tell a grown woman to pause her life so her brother can catch up? When Nathan broke off his engagement 3 years ago, they asked me to be patient a little longer. When his next relationship failed, they told me not to add pressure. And I obeyed, against my better judgment. I lost years to waiting. I even turned down Daniel's first proposal. I was so used to sacrificing that I didn't even question it anymore. Daniel never pressured me, but I saw the pain in his eyes each time I postponed our life together. He deserved more. I deserved more. Eventually, Nathan did get engaged again, and that's when the green light finally came. "Now you may move forward," my mother said, like she was a monarch granting permission. So I did. I planned a modest wedding with Daniel, filled with the people who truly supported us. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a strange mix of joy and dread. I picked out flowers and napkin colors, but couldn't stop checking my phone for a reply from my parents. After sending out the formal invitation, I waited. No RSVP, no call, not even a polite acknowledgement. I wondered if they were ignoring it or if they'd received it at all. Daniel noticed my restlessness. "They'll come around," he said, placing his hand over mine during dinner. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe they were just processing, adjusting to the idea. But deep down, I knew better. My parents didn't come around. They controlled, and if they couldn't control, they punished. Quietly, coldly. Still, I tried. I called once. My mother answered with the usual clipped politeness. "Yes, we got the invitation. The date is awfully close to Nathan's engagement party. I just hope people won't be confused." "Confused about what?" I asked, confused myself. She sighed. "About where their loyalties should lie." I didn't respond. She changed the subject to a neighbor's gallbladder surgery and ended the call without mentioning the wedding again. Nathan, for his part, was passive as always. When I saw him at a coffee shop a week before the wedding, he hugged me like nothing was wrong. I asked him if he was coming. He gave a sheepish shrug. "It's just kinda awkward, you know. I don't want to upset Mom and Dad. You know how they get." I nodded, but inside something in me hardened. I realized Nathan would never stand up for me. He'd never risk even a drop of their approval. Not for me. So I poured myself into the preparations. I tried to focus on Daniel's unwavering love, on our shared dream. We were keeping it small, intimate. A rented garden space behind a friend's art studio, soft jazz in the background, homemade pastries instead of a cake. Everything felt personal and honest, but the absence of my parents hung over it like a shadow. I kept telling myself I didn't care, that I was done begging for their approval. But late at night, when Daniel was asleep, I'd sit by the window and stare into the dark, wondering what was so wrong with me that my own parents couldn't be happy for me. Was I still just second place to my brother? Still the daughter expected to sacrifice quietly? 3 days before the wedding, I called again. I rehearsed my words. Just an honest plea. No pressure, no confrontation. I left a message. I know this isn't what you wanted. I know you don't agree with the timing. But I want you there. I want you to witness my happiness. That's all. No reply. On the day before the wedding, a delivery truck arrived with a long white box. For a second, my heart jumped. Maybe a gift? A sign of reconciliation? I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a thin beige shawl and a card. For modesty, you don't want to look desperate. Love, Mom. That was it. No congratulations, no apology. Just another reminder that in her eyes, my happiness was something to tone down, to conceal. I almost didn't wear the dress. But then Daniel came in, holding my hand tightly. Tomorrow's about us. Just us. You and me. And I knew he was right. The morning of my wedding felt strangely quiet. There was no flurry of phone calls, no mothers fussing, no family chatter in the background. Just silence, the kind that fills a space too quickly when something important is missing. The garden venue looked beautiful. Friends had arrived early, some helping with the final touches, others just offering quiet support. Daniel's sister tied white ribbons around the chairs while his father checked the sound system. The whole scene was peaceful, loving, and yet incomplete. As more guests arrived, I started noticing who wasn't there. My Aunt Joanne, who used to braid my hair during summer visits. Uncle Harold, who never missed a family event. My cousin Amy, who once called me her role model, all absent. At first, I tried to justify it. Maybe someone got sick. Maybe a flight was delayed. But as the clock ticked on, it became clear they weren't coming. I stepped away and called my parents one more time, just to know. My father answered on the second ring. I just need to ask, I said quietly. Did you tell them not to come? The family? A long pause. We made our thoughts known, he said. They made their own decisions. They made those decisions based on your judgment, I said. You told them this wedding was wrong. My mother's voice cut in, cool and practiced. You chose to ignore tradition. You chose to make this about yourself. We simply shared the truth with others. It's not our fault they agree. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. I waited, like you asked. I gave up more than I should have. And now I'm asking for one day. Just one. You've already taken more than your share, my mother said, her voice sharp. Now let it go. I hung up. A strange calm settled over me. Maybe this was what closure looked like, when the begging stopped and the grieving began. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 20 minutes. I stood behind the curtain, veil in place, bouquet in hand, heart steadying itself beat by beat. I looked around at those who had come. Friends, a few distant acquaintances, Daniel's warm-hearted relatives, and then I saw her. She was standing alone near the back row, holding a small clutch in one hand. Her dark hair was pinned up, and she wore a fitted navy dress. Her expression was careful, like she wasn't sure if she'd be welcome, and for a moment, I wasn't sure I was seeing her right. Chloe, Nathan's ex-fiancée. I blinked, confused. Of all people, I hadn't expected her. We hadn't spoken in over a year, not since Nathan broke things off with her abruptly. Back then, we were close. Close enough to cry together after family dinners when my mother's comments became too sharp or too cold. Chloe had called me the only normal one in the family. And when she left, it had felt like a quiet betrayal. I never reached out, but now she was here. I realized suddenly, I had sent her an invitation without thinking. Her name was still in my address book. It had been automatic. I never expected her to come, yet here she was. A lone dot. We sat at the edge of the garden, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses faint behind us. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting soft golden light on Chloe's face. She was quiet at first, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. I never thought I'd be back here, she said finally. But when I saw the invitation, I don't know. It felt like closure. I nodded. I wasn't even sure you'd get it. It was automatic. I didn't really think. I'm glad you didn't think. I needed to be here. There was a pause, heavy, but not uncomfortable. Can I ask you something? I said. Why did it end? With Nathan. You just disappeared. Chloe let out a short, humorless laugh. You know the story they told, right? That I pressured him, that I wanted too much too fast. I nodded slowly. That's what they said. Well, I didn't. He did. What do you mean? She looked at me, eyes clear. Nathan never intended to marry me. He liked the engagement ring, the parties, the public image. But the moment we started planning a real life together, he pulled away. He was seeing someone else behind my back. A girl from his gym, I think. Blonde. Younger. I stared at her. Are you serious? Chloe nodded. I confronted him. He didn't even deny it. Said he felt trapped and that he wasn't ready. But he didn't want to lose his parents' support either, so he pretended to be devoted to me just long enough to keep the show going. My breath caught in my throat. But my parents, they don't know, she interrupted. They still think he was heartbroken and confused. He cried to your mom and your dad? Your dad offered him more responsibility in the company to keep him focused. I closed my eyes. I could picture it perfectly. My father, puffed up with pride, giving Nathan tasks he wasn't ready for, handing him pieces of the family business as if that would set him straight. You know that trip he took last year? The one your parents said was for business development in Chicago? I nodded. He was in Mexico with that girl. He used the business account for the flights. I turned to her, stunned. Are you sure? Chloe pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. Nathan, shirtless by a pool, drink in hand, a girl in a red bikini beside him. He sent it to a mutual friend, bragged about it. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. And your dad has no idea? I whispered. He thinks Nathan is helping him expand. But Nathan's not doing anything. He shows up late, delegates everything, and takes credit. Your father covers for him, thinks he's just a young and learning. Chloe's voice softened. They're blind to him, completely. I stared at the garden path, anger slowly mixing with grief. I had given up years of my life waiting for Nathan to settle down. And all along, he had been drifting through life, protected by the illusion of being a promising son. I always thought they ignored me because I wasn't enough, I whispered. But now I see they ignored me because I didn't need fixing. They didn't think they had to worry about you, Chloe said. You were stable, quiet, careful. You never needed rescuing, so they gave him everything. And he's burning it down, I muttered. She nodded. Piece by piece. I looked at her and felt something shift. The ache I had carried for years, the desperate need for validation, for acknowledgement, began to crack. I'm not waiting anymore, I said. You shouldn't, she replied. You never should have had to. After Chloe left to catch her flight back to Seattle, I stood for a moment in the middle of the garden, watching the sunlight begin to shift toward early evening. The ceremony was behind us, but the reception was still in full swing. Laughter bubbled from the tables, children danced barefoot near the fountain, and Daniel had that soft, satisfied look on his face that reminded me why I had said yes, twice. I took a deep breath and rejoined the celebration. There were toasts and laughter, dancing and music. I moved from table to table, hugging old friends and thanking them for coming. But just as I was finishing a glass of champagne and about to sit down for dinner, I saw a familiar figure walking through the gates. For a second, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, but no, it was her, my godmother, Helen. She was dressed in an elegant forest green dress, her white hair pinned up in her usual neat bun. She waved at me as she approached, smiling like nothing in the world could have stopped her from being there. I ran to her, nearly tripping over the edge of my dress. You came, I breathed. Of course I did, she said firmly, wrapping her arms around me. I told your mother I wouldn't be manipulated into missing the most important day of your life. I pulled back, eyes wide. You spoke to her? 2 nights ago. She tried to guilt me, said you were acting selfish, that you were trying to take the spotlight from Nathan. I told her she was being absurd. Her voice was sharp, clear. She hung up on me, but I don't care. I couldn't miss this. I hugged her again, tighter this time. It wasn't just her presence. It was the fact that someone had chosen me. Willingly, bravely. Helen took a seat at our table, and I introduced her to Daniel and the others. She raised a toast that made half the room cry and the other half cheer. For the first time that day, I felt something that almost resembled peace. Later that evening, just before we cut the cake, I stepped aside to post a few photos from the day. Nothing dramatic, just a few candid shots. Me and Daniel laughing, the ceremony set up, Helen raising her glass. I added a simple caption: grateful for love, for honesty, and for those who choose to show up. I tucked my phone away and returned to the celebration. It took less than an hour for the call to come. I stepped outside to answer it, heart already sinking. My mother's name lit up the screen like a warning. I answered, "Hello? You really think that was appropriate?" Her voice was cold, sharp as ever. "Excuse me? Posting photos like that? Making it public? You think humiliating us like that is something to be proud of?" I blinked. "I didn't mention you. I didn't say a word about you." "You didn't have to," she snapped. The message was clear. Grateful for those who show up? You think you're clever? I'm not trying to be clever, I'm just done pretending. "I gave you everything," she hissed. "And this is the thanks I get? Public shame? Disrespect?" "You gave me conditions," I said, my voice shaking. "Love with strings. And then you pulled those strings tighter every time I tried to live my life." There was silence on the other end. Not long, just enough to feel like a slap. "You're an ungrateful girl," she said. "And I hope you realize one day what you've lost." She hung up. I stared at the phone screen. It didn't hurt the way I thought it would. Not anymore. There was no more space inside me to twist into knots over her approval. Instead, I turned back toward the soft lights of the garden, the sounds of laughter, the warmth of a chosen family, and I smiled the morning after the wedding. The house was still and quiet. Daniel had fallen asleep with a soft smile on his face, his arm draped over me like a protective promise. But I couldn't sleep. Something inside me had shifted, not just from the joy of the day, but from Chloe's words, my mother's coldness, and all the unfinished questions clawing at the edge of my mind. One stuck louder than the rest. How much damage has Nathan really done, and how many others were caught in it? I couldn't ignore it, not anymore. I got out of bed quietly, slipped into a hoodie, and padded barefoot into the living room. I opened my laptop and pulled up social media. I started typing names I remembered from long ago. Women Nathan had dated briefly, disappeared from our family dinners as quickly as they arrived. One in particular stood out: Rachel Monroe. We had crossed paths maybe twice, years ago. She was kind, reserved, and I remembered how uncomfortable she looked, sitting at our parents' dining table while my mother interrogated her about her plans. Nathan had told us she was too boring, then moved on. I found her profile easily. She had a public email listed under her photography business. I typed quickly, "Hi, Rachel. This is probably unexpected, but I'm Nathan's sister. We met briefly a few years ago. I'm reaching out with a strange request and no pressure to respond. I'm trying to understand things from the past, and I think you might have insight into my brother that I need. If you're open to a short call, it would mean a lot. L." I didn't expect a reply. But 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was her. "Hi," she said cautiously. "This might sound dramatic, but I've been waiting years for someone in that family to ask me what really happened." That was how the flood began. We spoke for over an hour. She told me about how, in the beginning, Nathan was charming and sweet, said all the right things. But then, not even 2 months into their relationship, he started asking about her job, her savings, whether she had access to her parents' credit cards. He even joked about gold digging like it was cute. "He never even tried to hide it," she said. "He made comments like, 'I'm not ready to work myself into a grave. I'll marry smart, not hard.'" I felt a sick twist in my gut. Did he ever mention my parents? Their money? All the time. Said they'd always cover for him, that they were obsessed with making him look good. He called himself the insurance plan. Told me once, even if I screw up, they'll pay to fix it. I barely knew what to say. Rachel hesitated. "I wanted to tell your mother once. I almost did. But then she started criticizing me for not being polished enough. So I backed off. I figured they knew who he was and they didn't care." I thanked her and hung up, but I didn't stop there. Over the next few hours, I reached out to 3 more women. 2 responded. One was a marketing assistant he'd dated while figuring things out after college. The other was a woman he had briefly lived with, who said he disappeared one day with 2 of her credit cards and a laptop. They all had something in common: Nathan's manipulation, his charm, and his open disdain for responsibility. And not one of them had ever been taken seriously, because no one had ever asked. I sat at my desk, the sun slowly creeping through the blinds, phone full of screenshots, stories, and proof. My hands trembled, not from shock, but from clarity. Nathan wasn't just immature, he was calculated, and our parents, they were willfully blind, maybe even in denial. But either way, they had enabled this. Every lie he told, every woman he used, every dollar he stole, he had done it with the safety net they provided. And I was the one they punished for moving on with my life. But I wasn't angry in that moment. Not exactly. I was awake. And that was worse and better all at once. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I watched the sunrise from the kitchen table, my laptop still open, my phone filled with voice notes, texts, photos. A part of me kept thinking they'd call, that maybe, somehow, they already knew, that they were just too proud to admit it. But there was only silence. Daniel stirred around 7, came out in a t-shirt and pajama pants, blinking at me in confusion. "You've been up all night?" "I'm fine," I said, gently brushing his hand. "I just need to do one more thing." "Are you sure you want to do this?" "I don't want to, but I have to." He didn't argue. I made the call just after 9. I didn't say much. Just told them I needed to speak with them both, in person, and that it was important. "We're busy," my mother said flatly. "Please," I said, voice steady. "Just give me an hour. I'm bringing something I think you deserve to see." There was a pause. Then she sighed. "Fine. Noon." Daniel offered to come with me, but I told him no. This had to be mine. I drove in silence, the folder on the passenger seat like a ticking clock. The house looked exactly the same, but I didn't feel the same walking into it. For the first time, I wasn't there to ask for anything. I was there to give them something they'd refused to see. They were waiting in the living room. My father stood by the fireplace, arms crossed. My mother sat with her hands folded in her lap, her face unreadable. "What is this about?" she asked, already tired. I took a breath. "It's about Nathan." My father's brow furrowed. "What about him?" I pulled the folder from my bag and set it on the table. "I've been speaking to his former partners, Chloe, Rachel, others. They told me things, and they backed it up." I laid out the photos. The trip to Mexico funded by the business card, texts where he bragged about never needing to work as long as the family paid, voice notes of him calling women short-term solutions. My parents didn't move. "Are you listening?" I asked. My father's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get this?" "I told you, from the women he hurt." "You've been digging into your brother's private life?" my mother snapped. "Why? To humiliate him?" "No, to finally understand why I was forced to put my life on hold for someone who was never held accountable." "You don't know what you're talking about," she said coldly. "Nathan is under a lot of pressure. He's had setbacks." "He's been lying," I interrupted. "Stealing, using people. He hasn't earned anything you've given him. You built him a stage and he turned it into a con." My father waved his hand dismissively. "Those are just screenshots. Words, probably taken out of context." My chest tightened. "It's not just screenshots. I talked to them. They had no reason to lie. They're not trying to destroy him. They were already destroyed by him." "And you believe them over your own brother?" my mother said, rising now, voice rising too. "How convenient." I stared at her. "So nothing I show you will matter?" "No," she said sharply, "because I know my son. He's not perfect, but he's not a monster. You're bitter. You've always been bitter, envious." My father stepped in. "That's enough. You come into our house after disrespecting us, after parading your so-called wedding." "It was my wedding," I said quietly. "And you boycotted it." He turned away, as if the conversation bored him now. "I don't know what you expected. You've always tried to turn us against him." I felt it then, the final snap of the string I had clung to for years. "I expected you to care," I said. "Not just about me, about the truth, About the people your son hurt. My mother sat down again, coldly composed. You're not the first daughter to resent her brother, but I suggest you stop now before you ruin what's left of this family. There's nothing left to ruin, I said. I packed the folder back into my bag, slow and careful. I looked at them one last time. My mother stared ahead, unmoving. My father refused to meet my eyes, and I left. For a long time, I didn't even know where I was going. I just drove. Past streets I used to walk as a child, past shops my mother once dragged me into for matching sweaters, past the world I used to bend myself to fit inside. Eventually, I pulled into my godmother Helen's driveway. I didn't call first. I just parked, walked up to the door, and knocked. She answered in a robe, hair still damp from a shower, but she took one look at my face and said, "Come in." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I dropped the folder of printed evidence onto her kitchen counter like a weight I was tired of carrying. They didn't believe me, I said flatly. They said I was jealous. They said I was bitter. They said Nathan was under pressure. Helen opened the folder, flipping through the photos, the screenshots, the timeline I had created. Her lips pressed into a line, but she didn't speak. I spent years trying to be what they needed me to be, I continued, my voice shaking now. Quiet, good, patient. I didn't argue when they told me to wait for Nathan. I gave up time, a child, a life, because they said it was the right thing to do. Helen's eyes flicked up, but I wasn't finished. And now, after everything, they still can't see me. All they see is him. Helen closed the folder and reached across the table to take my hand. I believe you, she said. I always have. I nodded once, then stood. I don't want it anymore, I said, pushing the folder toward her. I don't want to carry it. I don't want to fix anything. I'm done. You don't have to fix them, she said softly. No, I said. I don't even want to try. I left the folder in her hands and walked out. The next few days were strange, quiet, but not peaceful. I didn't answer calls. I didn't open messages. My phone lit up once with a message from Nathan, just a question mark. I deleted it without opening. Daniel gave me space, checking in gently but not pushing. He seemed to understand this was a grieving process I had to go through alone, not the grief of losing my parents, but the grief of realizing they were never truly mine to begin with. I slept a lot, cooked nothing, let laundry pile up. And then one evening, as I mindlessly scrolled through social media, I saw it. A photo, a cropped snapshot, clearly taken at a party. Nathan stood next to a familiar face, Lindsay, the woman he'd gotten engaged to just months after breaking things off with Chloe. Except this time, she wasn't on his arm. She stood on the opposite end of the group, arms folded, eyes elsewhere. The caption was harmless enough, single again and loving it, posted by one of Nathan's friends. But the tags told the real story. Lindsay had removed his last name from her profile. Her relationship status had quietly changed. Gone. Over. I stared at it, not surprised, not even angry, just tired. He had done it again. Another woman, used and discarded. Another life he walked through like a guest at a party, leaving only spilled wine and broken glass behind. And my parents? They were probably still defending him, blaming her, blaming me. But I felt none of it now. No need to fix, no hope of repair, just space. Space where once there was longing. I shut off my phone and leaned into Daniel's arms on the couch. For the first time in years, I allowed myself the luxury of not explaining anything to anyone. I didn't owe them a thing. It was the second Sunday after the wedding when Helen called. I didn't expect it. I had almost forgotten the folder even existed. I'd let it all go, or at least I was trying to. She didn't start with small talk. I thought you should know, she said, her voice calm, but tinged with something unreadable. I spoke to your Aunt Joanne yesterday, and to Harold. They reached out to me. I sat up straighter. About what? Well, she said, they've all seen the pictures, from the wedding. They saw the way you looked, free, calm. And then they saw Lindsay's announcement online. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. They're putting the pieces together now. Chloe, Lindsay, your absence from family dinners. The fact that no one even knew Nathan had been using the business account like a credit card. It's starting to crack through. Through what? Their denial, she said. Your parents' story is beginning to fall apart. and people are noticing. For a moment, I didn't know what to feel. There was no victory in it, just a quiet validation. I hadn't needed revenge. I had only ever wanted clarity. And now it was coming, not through confrontation, but through simple, visible truth. Helen continued, "Your Aunt Joanne told me she regrets not coming to the wedding. She said she let your mother shame her into staying silent. She says it won't happen again." I closed my eyes, a long, slow breath. "And the others? They're stepping back. Some have called your parents to ask questions they don't want to answer. Some aren't speaking to them at all anymore." I leaned back on the couch, Daniel beside me, a warm mug in my hands. Outside, the spring air carried birdsong through the open window. Peace. Real peace. "They still don't believe it, do they?" I asked. "No," Helen said gently. "But they're alone now. Not because of you. Because of who they chose to protect." There was a long pause before she added, "And because everyone sees it now, they're not protecting Nathan anymore. They're enabling him, and everyone knows it." I didn't smile. It wasn't a joyful thing to hear, but it settled something inside me. The idea that I wasn't the angry daughter anymore. I was simply the one who stepped out of the storm. Later that week, I received a message from my cousin Amy, someone who hadn't come to the wedding. It was short, awkward, but honest. "I'm sorry, I should have been there. You deserved better. If you ever want to talk, I'd like to listen." I didn't respond right away, but I didn't delete it either. Daniel and I started making weekend plans. Normal things. A drive to the coast, a home project, a movie night. He never once brought up my parents unless I did. He never rushed me to heal. He just held space, steady as ever. One afternoon, as we cleaned out the office to make space for a little reading nook I'd dreamed of for years, I found the old box of photo albums my mother had forced on me before we stopped speaking. I opened it. In one picture, I was about 10, holding Nathan's hand while he cried on the first day of school. I had my other arm around him, protective, always protective. I closed the box, not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need to hold it anymore. My story had changed, not rewritten, but reclaimed. They had told me to wait. But I hadn't waited, I had chosen, and that made all the difference.